Hello humans, it's Stephen again. This is the Puma Gte. It's currently blocking the traffic at Velo Cittá. I'm going to give you the chance to laugh at me while I attempt a hot lap, and then I'll do a 5-lap race against the AI, which should be just long enough for me to bore you to tears about both car and circuit. See you on the track. Welcome to Velo Cittá in Brazil, and welcome to the cockpit of the Puma Gte. Now, as you can see, the textures aren't perhaps as photorealistic as you'd find in the latest racing sims, but they're serviceable enough. Now, I did underestimate the number of laps I was going to do in this race. It's going to be 7 instead of 5 because I want to prolong the agony. Let's get on with it. Right, so what is the Puma Gte? Well, it's a Brazilian sports car from the 1970s. I'll just try and avoid any T1 carnage. It's powered by a 1.7 litre naturally aspirated engine that produces 112 brake horsepower. And it may surprise you to learn that the engine is seated in the back, although the design of the car disguises that quite nicely. The transmission is a 4-speed 8-shifter, and the car is pretty light at 685 kilograms. Some of you may be thinking, hang on, 4-cylinder engine in the back, 4 gears, 8-shifter, sounds a bit ropey. It's not a Beetle, is it? Well, yes, I must confess, this car is a Beetle, or a Brazilian Beetle, a Fusca, with a snazzy Italian-influenced body on top. Now, to digress a bit, many moons ago when men wore drainpipe trousers and women wore beehive hairdos like Marge Simpson, my parents owned a Volkswagen Karmann-Ghia. It was probably the most glamorous car they ever owned. And that was basically a Beetle chassis and engine with a beautiful Italian-styled body on top. And I maintain that classic Karmann-Ghia's backside is one of the most attractive derrieres in motorcar history. Anyway, my father used to dread driving it on motorways because other drivers would see this glamorous Porsche type car in their mirrors and move aside to let it speed past, not knowing that it had a knackered Beetle engine in the back of it, and my father had to thrash the car to within an inch of its life to edge past. And the same goes for the Puma Gte. The engine couldn't pull a string really, but the car is light, so it eventually gets up a head of steam to about 110 miles an hour or so. Now the Pumas rolled off the production line from about 1970, and until 1973 they were based on the Karmann-Ghia chassis, which was slightly different from the Beetle. But when VW decided to stop making the Karmann-Ghia, Puma moved to using the Fusca, the Brazilian Beetle chassis, and that's what we see in Automobilista. And in fact, I think, although Reiser doesn't explain this, the model might actually derive from the years 73 to 1977, because this being an air-cooled engine, it requires air intakes, and these were installed behind the side windows, which gave rise to the charming nickname of, forgive the pronunciation, Tubarão, which is shark. So this is the Shark Puma, which is all rather confusing. And to keep the animal theme going, you might have noticed that the brake markers here at Velo Cittá, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, are pictures of increasingly distressed chimpanzees. No idea why, but I'm glad they're there. Now, because the engine's air-cooled, there's no need for a radiator, which means there's no need for a radiator grille at the front of the car. Hence, from the front, the car looks rather German, like a Porsche, and from the rear, being based somewhat on the Lamborghini Miura, it looks Italian, and it's a pleasing hybrid. That's all well and good, Stephen, you might be saying, but what do you think of the car? Well, I think it looks excellent, although, like the other cars in the Brazilian touring car DLC, the models are a little Spartan. They look good, don't get me wrong, but they're rather plain. But it does mean that the car does take liveries rather well. It will take a lot of colour. So the Puma GT is undoubtedly an attractive car. As for the sound, well, careful Stephen. As for the sound, well, it seems that Reiser has taken the audio files from the Fusca, the Beetle in the game, and put them straight into the GTE, because they share the same power plant. They did the same with the GTB, taking those audio files from the Opala. It's not the most exciting thing to look at, but to listen to rather, but it's got character. As for the driving, well, when Reiser released the 4 Pumas at Christmas, and it was at Christmas, they released on Christmas Eve, and a hotfix actually came out on Christmas Day, would you believe it? I was really looking forward to driving this car, and after a few minutes I was sorely disappointed. I didn't like the car one little bit. I could barely keep it on the road. In fact, I was so disappointed I ignored it in favour of the other 3 Pumas. But I got to thinking a bit as to why I couldn't keep the car on the track apart from my undoubted lack of skill. And I thought, no wonder the back end wants to come round all the time. There's a big heavy engine in the back, acting as a pendulum. So, although I'm no setup guru, I thought to myself, increase the rear camber, which I did, so that the tyres lean strongly inwards, and immediately the car became drivable. Then another light bulb went off in my head, and I realised that I could use the throttle to control the back end, rather like this. And all of a sudden the car became a delight to drive. In fact, it's rapidly become one of my favourite cars in Automobilista. It's slow enough that you can make a mistake and recover. And it's also slow enough that you can bully it just like that. Now to go back to the Karmann-Ghia for a second, that car was 3 or 4 miles an hour faster than the Beetle simply because the bodywork was lower and more aerodynamic, and the same can be said for the Puma. But it has another advantage in that the body is made out of fiberglass. So it's surprisingly light and nippy. So I really like this car. Now, as for the circuit, now Velo Cittá opened in 2011 or so. It's got a close connection with Mitsubishi. The circuit was the idea of a Brazilian Mitsubishi importer. And you'll notice Mitsubishi have flags and placards dotted around the circuit. And indeed the Mitsubishi Lancer Cup started here. And that's a car which you'll find in Automobilista. So, yet again, Automobilista will give you an unusual yet completely authentic experience should you so choose. Another thing that surprises me about this track is that the Brazilian Stock Car Championship has a round here. And it's hard to believe that those massive, powerful cars get round here in one piece, but they do. And again, if you want to see how they do it, Automobilista has the stock cars in the game. And if you want to try that, I wish you luck. I think Velo Cittá it feels like the most technical track in Automobilista. It's really tricky, it takes some learning. But once you get the hang of it, it's got a great flow to it. Now this is Karmann-Ghia. I'm not quite sure of the translation, but you mustn't leave your braking late here, otherwise you simply will not make this corner no matter what you do. And again, use the throttle, back end swings out, that's it, just balance it on the throttle. This next curve is well named, it's Paciencia, or Patience Curve. Now keep it in third, don't drop it into second, keep the revs up, and out we come. And this is Ferradura, or Horseshoe. I find it difficult because there's no visual reference points. You don't know when you're going to drive off the track. This is Vittoria, or Victory Curve. Now the circuit is homologated by the FIA. It's got all the latest safety equipment and standards, but I don't like this line that you have to take that takes you into the pit lane exit. That seems to me inherently dangerous as we go through Curva dos Macacos, or Monkey's Corner. There we go, lift off oversteer, the back end comes out, and now this is Caipirinha, named after Brazil's national cocktail, maybe because you have to do a drunken samba as you climb up the hill. It's a great S-bend that. There we go, just bully the car. And this is Mata, or Woods or Forest Corner. Coming up is Museo, or Museum Corner. Now it's tempting to drop into second, try not to. Stay in third and keep the revs up. First gear in this car is to get the car moving. Second is to keep it moving, and after that you can safely ignore them. It's tempting to drop into second, especially at a corner like Giga coming up. But if you do that, the car simply bogs down. So keep it in third. Ooh, nearly lost it. So, in summary, if a clot like me can drive this car at this circuit, I think you should be able to too, he said, struggling to complete the sentence. And I hope our Factor 2 fans will enjoy this car, as it's coming to that sim fairly soon. Now, again, I'm losing the power of speech and comprehension, so I think I'd better bring things to an end with a spectacular slide, and just to annoy the marshals. And it only remains for me to say thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye.